check. Check, check, check. Mic check. Sound check. Okie dokie, guys. I am Darude, as you might guess if you ended up here. I am in my studio, and this Monday is a studio session stream, and I did a poll last week on Twitter and then today again on Instagram, and I got a result. The result is a track called Calm Before the Storm, which was done in 99, the original version, which I'm going to go and break down in this stream. Calm Before the Storm is also almost the name track of my album, and somehow it has the name Storm in it. And my first album is called Before the Storm. And the options were Coming Home, Tell Me, and then Calm Before the Storm. So I'm going to break down Calm Before the Storm first. Let's see who we have here. We have, okay, Rob and J. Rich, David, Mbarak, Heather, Trent, Sopaman, Lava, Yoka, Jovan, Medic Man, Demi, and Slayer to begin with. And Mika jumped in from Turku, Finland as well. So what we are going to do is, I'm going to have my tea hanging there for a little more so I could get the best out of it. And I'm going to load the project. So I made Calm Before the Storm in 99 at some point, I don't remember, it was actually before Sandstorm. And my gear at that point was a Pentium 2 PC. I don't remember how much memory, but I would guess like maybe 32 megs or something like that. Not much, maybe 64. I don't remember anymore, though I have that PC still in my old studio, sort of stored there. I was using Cubase, and at that point it was Cubase VST 24, I think, or 32. It updated at some point around that time, 98, 99, 92, or 2000. And at that point, Cubase was the first ever DAW to actually have virtual plugins like we now have, tens and hundreds of them. But back then, there was this bass plugin that was the first one that actually was like in the VST, under the VST standard and VST category, and I never really used that for much because I didn't have the processing power. But Cubase also at that point was one of the first DAWs that I had my hands on. Obviously there was probably Pro Tools way before that with the dedicated hardware and stuff, but Cubase ran natively on a PC, and you could mix, I don't remember if it had a limitation, but for me at that point, as many audio tracks that I wanted. And I had one synthesizer, which is still here. It's a Korg TR rack, i.e. Trinity rack version of it. And it was my first ever synth, and I still love it. Most of the sounds in Calm Before the Storm come from that. And I was running it in the multi-mode, or hold on, it's called, wow. Because this has a program mode and combi mode, and program mode is single sound, combi is you can make big fat combinations of several sounds, but hold on, it is called, yeah, it's just a multi-mode. And so you can use 16 different MIDI channels to feed the 16 different sounds. and then they have sort of quite less effects per channel, or you can share some send effects if you want to. And so when I made the track, I was making it, so to say, live within the synth, i.e. whatever effects I was using, I mixed it internally, the levels in that with the, come on dude, it's not that boring. And then when I got the track done, MIDI wise, I recorded it times, I don't remember if it's 16 tracks, but all the tracks separately from there as audio in Cubase, and then after that I mixed it down in Cubase. So I've got the project here right now, and at this point, my apologies, I still don't have a reliable screen capture thing going on, and there's many reasons to that. I'm working on it, and it will happen someday very soon. For anybody interested, I did try the NDI technology that you can use, and while it works quite nicely, there's a good bit of lag, and I found that me messing on the screen with the camera, which I think now is quite okay focused, this works better because this is real time or close to real time. Jovan Lukovac, you keep asking about new tracks released and the dates in every stream and every other 5 minutes, which I appreciate you wanting new music, and it is coming, but like I told last time, I don't have an actual release date, and I'm not going to play an actual track in this actual stream, and it won't help if you ask many times. I don't mean anything negative by it, but it's just a little repetitive, and if I've said that I can't do that right now, or I don't have a deadline or release date for you right now, then I just simply don't. Okay? Thank you. So this is the original Cubase file recreated in Logic, and I have 99% of the same effect sounds, same loop sounds, and then I actually recorded all the single tracks that I needed to recreate this sound. I had the original MIDI from the original Cubase exported, Cubase project exported, and then I was just built this layer by layer. And this is how the track sounds. Official new people, but this is, I'm talking about the same person who's asking the same question over and over again. Moi Petteri, ei uutta, vaan vanhaa. So, yes, David, every color represents different sound or sound type. Up here, all the green stuff, all the green stuff in my projects is always some sort of an effect sound. Like here we have some booms and sweeps and crash cymbals. Batman, this is Logic Pro. Only for final mixing and mastering, yes, I do stems. All right, so this track is called Calm Before the Storm, and this is the original version that I made on my own before my buddy and producer, then producer J16, got involved. The one that is on my album admittedly sounds a little, I don't know, more polished, and it's also a little more, I don't want to say complex, but more developed. There's the main melody thing, the guitar thing is the same. It's the same sound, same samples, but the chords are a little, or there's a little more added to them. So the chord structure is a little longer or a little more complex. And then, you know, obviously with the melody sound, then that reflects it. So it doesn't do the same exact thing that it does all the time here. This version was also released on whatever it was called, like special edition version of Before the Storm album later in 2000, maybe it was 2001. The main sound that I started from is this guitar sound, and I have an instrument of it here. And I sampled that sort of note by note from the Trinity for this project. So I have a virtual sampler instrument of it right now. And then because of some effect stuff and whatnot, I actually recorded it for audio, or the two audio here. It's so very simple. And I believe this is just an A minor track, because at that point especially, I'm still no genius with my keys, but then I would have almost always started with the white keys and easily from A or just A minor something. And the whole thing was after that, when I just first came up with the I looked for some chords for it, and then found other sounds around it. Where are my chords now? I'm gonna hide some stuff so I can see where I am. This is sound called Technophobic, and it's also from the Trinity rack. Anybody working on FL Studio these days? There's one sound in this project that I actually used the original, I think, Fruity Loops, maybe 1 or maybe even 0.9 or something, right when it came out. It had this quite simple synth, and I made this arpeggio with it that starts here. And I also recreated the filter sweep that I had it on top of it. It's this automation here. UK time is 2 hours behind. Oh, hey Amber. Sorry guys. So UK time is 2 hours behind Finland. Juokseet pari kertaa pihan ympäri, että sua haukottelet tässä livenä striimissä 18 kertaa. A noise sweep. Yeah, I know I need a yawn counter. Highly respectful coming to my stream and yawning every freaking 2 seconds. So this track is ultra res sweep. Like you hear, it has a little bit of resonance and it sweeps like that. So now this is the Fruity Loops as well, but goes a different way. Also added a little string here to add some dimension and some excitement. Hey Calvin. Thank you, Flame79. I thought was very cool about this track back then was that people keep asking me often, how long do I take to make a track? I wish I could say the same about every track, but I started this sometime in the AM after I woke up, so probably, I don't know, 10, 11 AM. I worked the whole day, and then I bounced the first version that I dared to play to somebody else before midnight that day, and I went to a club that night, and my DJ buddy, I wasn't a DJ at that time, so I needed to always find a DJ buddy somewhere, and it was at that point that I just started to find those who were crazy enough to play my music. So I took it to the club, and my DJ buddy played it, and it worked pretty well sound-wise, except one thing, which now in this version I've corrected a little bit, but so there's these booms here. Those big, I'm calling it deep bass here, there's crash and a kick on top of. Those were so loud, they were like 10 dBs too loud for the track, and the club PA rattled the whole building pretty much. And so it was interesting to be able to demo the track right away, and then I basically went home and, you know, first thing first, you know, probably took those down a few dBs, but never enough, because when I started recreating this version, now they're sort of more in check, and they still are quite boomy in a PA system, but not like blow my PA system boomy. All right. So what do we have? David Schwab, I can modify this creation as I listen. Well, I mean, yes, this is a track that I made over 20 years ago, and this is now a newly made exact replica of that, because I'm not using the same software and the same computer platform, i.e. that was a PC, anymore. So I recreated in my current Logic software, and I have all the separate sounds here. And I can basically, you know, if we zoom in the beginning here, this selected track right now, that's a kick drum. So I'm going to loop that part, and I can solo and listen to the kick drum alone, or I can mute the kick drum, for instance. Or we can listen to the guitar, or we can take it out. I can take out everything else but the drums, or play the bass. I have two basses, one is lower, one's the top bass with a little bit of delay on it. The other one is just a low-end bass. Most of the sounds are made with a keyboard. Yes, that would be what, yeah. I have this gadget here that you can't actually see right now. Let's see if I can change the overlay. David, there's this sound module that is basically a synthesizer, but it just doesn't have a keyboard. So I can tell that sound module to play what I play with this keyboard, for instance. And I've just basically built track by track using basically layers of sounds, and then when I'm done, then I've recorded them one by one. Like, you know, a guitar player would play his part, and then a piano player would play theirs, and then a bass player would play theirs. Like sometimes even these days bands do play together and it's one recording of them all, but way more common is that they are either playing in a very well sound-wise separated spaces or rooms, or they are playing so that they are all playing to a click track, and at first one is playing and then another one is playing and then a third one is playing, and then finally, you know, say a singer goes into the vocal booth and sings on top of what's been recorded and mixed so far. So they're all different layers of the whole thing, and that's how I've always also done my electronic stuff. So I come up with a loop and then I'm like, okay, so this is cool, but that clap is a little weak, so I'm gonna add an actual clap on top of it like this. I want to have a kick drum, so I'm gonna do this, but that kick drum doesn't have low end, so I'm adding an actual low end kick like this. I want to add a hi-hat. I'm going to add a ride cymbal on top of it. I'm going to add a shaker. Do you hear that? And I'm going to add a little snare fill, maybe some bass, and a little bit of little chords, synth type of thing. And then if I want to, where is my, yeah, so I can, you know, do various things, and this is how I mostly make my music anyways. It's sort of, I always call it sort of like building Lego stuff. So you just add layers and layers and layers and layers, and finally it sort of becomes something. My 3-year-old son is waving and trying to talk to your son.
What?
Hey! Okay, so we have mystery islands in the house. Okay, we have in the effects section, this is a very simple, that's a reverse cymbal going into a sort of a transition. And then it is met with this crash on the one. Like this. And when we go to the break, there's a little more of a bigger transition, sort of. And then these big bass things. Okay. Is my son interested in composing music too? What do you think, dude?
What, like making music?
Yep. Are you interested in making music?
Yeah, I haven't just done it in a little while because my computer is in here.
Yeah, I stole his Mac, my old Mac. But yeah, he makes his own music as well, and he's played the piano for over 5 years now. And actually last week, for those who didn't see it, you should check out my last week's, or was it the week before, stream. The title says Homeschooling. There's 2 videos where we made a cover version of Alan Walker's Faded. He learned that a while ago with piano, and then I had him play the piano parts in, and then we together built sort of a new version of the track with sounds from the Nord Rack synthesizer, for instance, and I don't remember if we actually used a JP or if we used a similar sound there, and then the bass came from the Sub 37 here. But yeah, and we're gonna continue that project at some point, and it's going to be basically based on
Did it get done already?
that session. No, but we're gonna be basing it on that session, and we're gonna have you create your own melodies and chords, because that's a cover song, and we're gonna have him use the same foundation sounds and whatnot, but create his own melodies, and then he can, you know, call it his actual own composition. Doing covers and remixes is a great way to learn, but obviously you can't claim them to be totally your own. So then it's.
They are in one way your own.
No, yeah, of course they're in one way your own, but they're not the. They're not. You can't say. Well, you can't say they're your own composition, which is the key factor, of course.
But your own version.
David, yeah, he wants to play in the NHL, of course.
I do.
Yeah. All right, so back to the track. What do we have here more? We have a very sort of... So the kick in this version is a little beefier and has more oomph in the low end than the original, because the original was this one, and it's a very, very typical actual 909 of that era, but it's lacking some oomph, so I created a new kick with a thing called Kick by Sonic Academy, and this is a Nicky Romero version of it. This is the Kick 1, and so it has actual low end there, and like I did the clap, this is the same clap I used earlier, a little bit of reverb on it, hi-hats, this loop, ride, shaker, then we have a 909 snare roll coming up. Vicious Code. Would I do a new remastered version of the first album? No. I don't think I have the need to do that. Of the full album, there are some tracks that I have recreated over the years, but neither Jaak or I have all the original samples and sequences anymore, so it's quite a lot of work. And while we both probably do remember a lot of the stuff combined, what was done and how we did it, then it would probably be just simply not worth using that time to do remastered versions of them, and then also or remade versions of them, and then remastering. It sounds good enough now. There's no point to just, if you mean just remaster, nah, no use for that. I mean, it was mastered right the first time, so anything done to it now would not really, make or break anything. Ben, how would I break down anything of Avicii's, because I didn't make them and I don't have his project files. Like this track is mine and I've got them sample by sample here. I can obviously could talk about Avicii's track X, Y, and Z, but it doesn't really make any sense because I don't know how he did them or what he used exactly. So that's that. Sorry for the silent moments. I'm just trying to read your things on a chat. What track do you think is the most defining in my career? Of course, it's Sandstorm. Yes, Ferry had a reason to do that. He's done some System F and also what has he done? Like he's done the live shows with his aliases, so that's a good reason to do that. And I'm not saying I'm not going to do new versions of the tracks, like actual 20 versions or 2021 or 24, I don't know. But there's no point to actually like remaster or make the same versions like that again of the whole album. Okay, yeah, well. Thanks for stopping by. Two bid. Yeah, the Undying Beautiful Things, Heikki and Darude remix is good. I played it quite a lot. If somebody was at the Portland show for New Year's Eve, I actually changed the year playing that song. A lot of the glory obviously goes to Undying, first of all, but then also Heikki L is the initiator of that remix, and I just sort of jumped on it and gave my input towards the final stages. But yes, I love playing that track, and it works really, really well in actually many contexts. So that's been that was a good one to do and good one to get released as well. I'm trying to think what else I would have to say. I had an eMagic AudioWork 8 sound card at the time. It was actually quite good quality sound card, but like at the time the difficulty was that I was a student, technology was very expensive, and the only thing I could afford was something like that, and even that was sort of first a loaner, and then I bought it after I tried it like half a year or whatever it was, and it only had a stereo input, so everything that you would do outside the computer with MIDI, you would actually have to record. So like for instance from the TR rack, 16 tracks in, so you would have to do the same recording 16 tracks at 16 times for one track. So it was a little different time at that point. When I was recreating this, I was actually comparing, if you want to check this out. So here's the original version, like from the CD. So I'm not saying the new mix is a trillion times better, but at least it's a little more towards today's sound, where the bass is louder and fatter, but it's also more controlled, and that's why it can be louder, fatter. And by no means I'm not exactly done with this mix yet. It still needs some fine tuning, but there's a good bit of more oomph. Now that I listen to it, the original track is a little brighter at the moment, which is because I don't have the final mixing done exactly on this one, and then I also haven't really compared to current other material. So many people say the Sandstorm lead sound is a JP8080 sound. It's not true, though the pad sound, it is from the JP8080. It's just the saw, big saw pad and filter tweaked from the preset a little bit, but not much more. That comes straight out of the JP8000 or 8080. The Sandstorm lead sound is a sample that I found somewhere and then later on distorted, and it became this distorted sound that you hear in Sandstorm. And it's quite unique as a sound, because I've heard a million people try to replicate it, you know, make their own version of Sandstorm and use it, but it just very easily does not sound the same. Oh, one fun fact, this loop, if you listen to Feel the Beat, the original mix or the original radio edit, that's in it as well. We used a different loop for Sandstorm that came from me, and then this also came from me when we were working on Feel the Beat, and used this one on that. This is initially a sort of clean loop with, like you can hear, those 909 toms and all that stuff, but then that's put through a distortion unit and a little delay added on top of it, and it becomes this. And if you look at the screen, it actually has some attacks and definition there, but it's actually quite squashed with all the distortion on it, and it's supposed to be quite thin in the mix, and then the actual other drums are the stuff that bring the actual attacks and actual rhythm to the whole thing, but that just adds a little groove and swing there, because if we listen to it, we can take it out. The track doesn't really change that much without it, but when you hear it and when you hear the delays going back and forth, it adds a little bit of rhythm stuff to it. Juha Tepsa, tämä on Logic Pro. All right, and then I'm using this software that I'm not going to show the whole thing, it doesn't matter really, but I use a software called Things that is basically my to-do list for anything and everything, and I have still a lot of on a to-do list for this particular mix to make it better sounding, not necessarily closer to the original, but better sounding in respects that that's still better than this, like high-end crispness, and some of the drums are better, sort of. And now I've actually edited this down. This length is 6 minutes 23 seconds or so, 25 with the fade outs and whatnot. And the original Calm Before the Storm was a little longer. I actually don't remember exactly how long. Well, I could tell you. Yeah, 7 minutes 16 seconds, so 40 seconds longer, because it was sort of not as effective. So I edited this down a little bit, but I bet if you'd listen to this and that on separate days, you might not recognize which one is which arrangement wise. Okay, Blinkbot, hi, and thanks for coming. If you think I deserve more viewers, please feel free and share in anything and everything you are on, so we can get more listeners. But thank you for coming and thanks for the compliment. Do I like Wendy's chili? Well, so I used to live in America, in Georgia, and around the time when I was there, so regularly in the US, I did eat some chili here and there. I don't know if Wendy's was my go-to one, but there are a couple places, even like the fast food joints, where I did like the chili. Well, yeah, I haven't had, takeout chili in a while. My wife makes a killer one. Yeah, I lived north of Atlanta in Roswell. Lemon pepper wings. I like, normally when I go to a wing place, I like them plain, and then I take barbecue and like honey mustard or something like that. I'm not actually that big of a fan of buffalo wing sauce. What was my favorite thing about living in America? I think the fact that I was close to gigs then, because I did a lot of touring in the US then. I mean, I still do, but now I always have to hop over the pond. But back then it was very much like a weekend deal, leaving later in the afternoon on Friday and being back home early afternoon on Sunday, doing 2 or 3 gigs. And now I need to leave either Thursday or Friday, and I'll be back Monday or Tuesday from Finland back to Finland. So that's basically one of those things. I didn't mind living in America for too many things. Traffic was one, especially in Atlanta, and I don't know if it's the real security or just felt sense of security. That's way better here in Finland. Finland is a very low crime country, and also very sort of, I don't know, it's cleaner and in that respect nicer. No offense to any Americans, but at least in some areas you probably know what I'm talking about. That said, I love my American friends, and I go there and play several times a year. So, it's just a better place for me to live and my family to live here. And one of the reasons we came here was because our son started getting closer to school age, and the school system here is free and one of the best ones in the world as well. So that was one of the reasons we came back here. Anthony Mullins, will I be coming back to Australia? Absolutely. I'm so bummed that Go in the Moo and the whole tour was cancelled now because of the lockdown. But hey, what can you do? I'll be definitely coming back. Australia is absolutely one of my favorite places to tour. Aussies go nuts anywhere and for anything, so they just love to party. Let's just have my borders open again and I'll be flying your way. I don't know if I've had those chips, Bratch 15. Okay. How do I like my MacBook? My MacBook rocks. Okay, so I wonder if you guys have anything specific to ask about this track. I don't know if I've covered anything and everything, and also I know this track like the back of my hand, so I might have overlooked something or overlooked something about just simply production. That feel free to ask. There's no dumb questions or nothing like that, so let me know. Am I ill? My voice sounds weird. No, it's actually a little scratchy today, though. You're correct, but come on, Rob. I'm just, you know what? Even if I come back to the hotel with a bottle of champagne, at least I'm not the one who is doing the shoeies, dude. Sparkle Honeysuckle, Max better than PCs for production? I wouldn't say so. It might have been like that at one point, but honestly though, let's not start a PC versus Mac war. I'm a Mac guy for sure, but most of the main software, you know, you have Pro Tools for Mac and PC, you have Cubase, and you have Ableton Live for Mac and PC. I believe is Fruity Loops or FL Studio now for Mac and PC as well. Logic that I use is only Mac software, so that's why I'm using it mostly, or using Macs, and I just love the OS versus Windows, but that's just me. Today, PCs and Macs use pretty much the same processor, same memory, same SSD hard drives. It's all kind of very close to it, and if you put the same hardware inside a PC and inside a Mac, the price is pretty much the same these days. And granted, you can get a 200 euro laptop, PC laptop, but it won't do the same things as my Mac does that I have put considerably more money in. So there's that. There's the processing power versus what you do with it, the amount of memory, what you do with it and whatnot. It all works both PC and Mac if you just know what you want and know how to, you know, spec your machine. Sparkly Honeysuckle, this track took a day to put together, and it's one of those rare tracks of mine that took so little time. I literally started in the morning, before noon sometime, I don't remember exactly, and I was done by the end of the night, like by 11 or 12, I rendered a version of it and went to a club, had my DJ friend played at the club that night. But I have tracks that literally took me years from initial ideas, something jotted down or something recorded, and then it didn't go anywhere. And then the next year I tried it again because I know that there's something in it, and then it didn't go anywhere. And then like 2 years later, I showed it to somebody, and then they were like, hey, that's cool, and let's do this and that and that. And then I get it done. It might be a day or it might be a week or two, but it just varies so much. Most of the time I get an idea of a track, like the composition, some melodic things and chords done, you know, sometimes in a few moments, sometimes in a day, but then the actual track and getting it done production-wise varies greatly from like few days to easily a few months. Well, Bratch15, thank you. Thanks for coming. Joe the Sim Racer, this is a good question, and this has simpler answer than you would think, most likely. What made me go into electronic music, and who did I enjoy? Well, okay, so that's a different question, but still. I never was a great live player of any instrument. Like I noodled around with the tiny Casio keyboard that we had, but that was really it. And then like the stupid recorder at school when everybody had to. Not that the recorder is stupid, but it was stupid that everybody had to. And it sounded horrible having 25 kids trying to play at the same time and nobody was on point. Anyway, so I loved music from really, really early age, and I have some memories regarding music like from 3 or 4 years old or something like that. But I was always just a consumer, just a listener, and I loved music like everybody else. But then around my like teenage years and so, I started listening to music in a little different way, and that was, more analytically and more like trying to write down the lyrics. I'm Finnish, so my native tongue was not English, but I was listening to a lot of rock and all kinds of stuff. And then trying to understand what was going on, like listening to, hey, here's a chorus and how this goes like this, and there's different parts of a piece of music. But still, not until I was like 20 years old, I started studying at a new school. There was a couple of guys who showed me how tracker programs work, which is like very, very rudimentary sampler software type of thing. And all of a sudden I heard layers. I heard, kick drum, hi-hat, bass, piano, and blah, blah. And it wasn't just this one lump that I was humming to or singing to only for the, lyrics, for instance, but it was this layered thing that I started hearing into. And then because of that, because until then there was no relationship from what I was hearing in music and my, like, say, keyboard playing or guitar playing or drums or whatever, because I didn't do those things like that. All of a sudden I started hearing in it, and then all of a sudden I realized that I can make it myself, because even with slower keyboard skills and whatnot, I could play melodies, I could play chords, and then if there was a bum note, I could correct it with a mouse and I could program it in and whatnot. And so then it was matter of me correcting it correct, and then it sounded good, and that was enough. I didn't need to be a virtuoso piano player to make music. So technically what made me make music, electronic music, was just I found that I had some sort of an ear to it and a skill to program it and tweak it until I found it good enough. And so that's it. Basically, electricity is the reason why I'm making electronic dance music. And then I found like-minded people, and I found, this just combo of all these things, like my passion and burn for making music, but then like the right timing, finding those people that showed me. Thanks JJ and Mikko, for instance, and there was a guy called Jussi who I first couple of times dabbled into the tracker stuff with. And then my idols at that time, somebody was asking, JS16, who became my producer after I guess bugged him one times too many or enough. And just I realized now, looking back, and this, I know I'm jumping a little bit, but people have asked me, like, do I believe in luck, or do I blah, blah, blah? But yes and no, but I believe that people create their own luck. If you have passion for something enough, and it's easy for me to say after the fact now, but I realized that I had such a passion. I went after stuff. I made music. I had no idea I could ever be a professional in it. I could ever get a track released. I wasn't imagining myself as a rock star, or it didn't exist at that time, like electronic star, DJ, like that. DJs existed, but not the rock star thing that DJs became at some point, led by the Tiestos and whatnot. So that didn't really exist. So I just started messing around and got there, and I made music for several years, well, 2, 3, 4 years before I gave my demo of Sandstorm to JS16. And I wasn't expecting money out of it. I wasn't expecting career out of it. I just loved every second of tweaking samples and, you know, finding sounds and whatnot. But JS was one of those guys who I luckily then got to actually work with, and he showed me the ropes on so many things like live performance and DJing and how to produce this and that and how to put your ideas on keys and onto the projects and whatnot. And I just learned by doing. But my point is that you create your own luck. If you have a passion for something, you don't count the hours that you're trying to do this and that, learn stuff, or even if you have the goal of going public with it and going successful with it, but you don't count the CDs and whatever you give to somebody that never got a result. You just count the one that matters, the one that got you signed or booked or whatever. So Osmund, I did not try the Genesis synth because I am a Mac guy, and I would love to. And I've watched the videos, and it sounds and looks amazing. So good for him doing it. It's great, and it's such a one-stop shop for all kinds of sounds. I wish I could use it, and I mean, I have a PC and I could try it if I wanted to, but I just don't see a point right now until it comes available for Mac. Kim Suomo, I lived in the US for 6 years, but I've been touring there since 2000. So, and my wife is American. That might affect my home language every day is English with my wife. Arkene, I played Tomorrowland, hold on, 2, 3 times now maybe? And why do I don't play Tomorrowland or something else? If I don't, it's not because I don't want to, but it's because the bookings work so that somebody invites you to play and you either take the gig or not. I can't call Tomorrowland and say like, hey, I'm coming playing this year. And on top of that, unfortunately, Tomorrowland does not happen this year because of this freaking lockdown. Sandstorm was made, I'll give you 2 separate answers because there was 2 separate things. I had a PC, I had Fast Tracker 2 on it, I had Cubase on it, and I had this TRX synthesizer, and then I had a software called SoundForge, and I had a software called Rebirth, in which I got some drums, and then there was a 303 bass, but I used it as a regular, just a bass, not a typical squelching 303. The Rebirth thing had 909 drums as well, and then some pad sounds came from the TRX, and I put it all together in Cubase VST, which was probably VST 32 at that point. But then that was my initial original version of it, but then when I played that to JS16 and he wanted to sign me and release Sandstorm, we reproduced it in his studio using his setup, and while the do-do-do sound is exactly the same and the chords are exactly the same, but the chords were done actually in JS16's studio with JP8080 by Roland. And then there's a crucial thing that came in with JS16's production was an arpeggio that comes from the Nordrak 2 that I have here as well. And then there's 909 drums that came from JS16's 909, actual 909, and then his JV 1080 sort of Rompler machine, some bass sounds, some other drums, claps and crash cymbals and stuff like that came from that. So there was two different versions of it, and most of you have never heard the original Sandstorm, because when we recreated it with JS, it became better. The arrangement changed a little bit, and it's mixed and arranged much better than the original. And I'm not sure if I'll ever play the original for you guys. Arkin Vivo, I use Ableton. I'm quite okay with Ableton, though not as quick as with Logic. And then I currently have Cubase 10 and also the latest Reason that I'm dabbling into. I used Cubase back in the day, but in 2002 when my then producer JS16 switched his system from Atari ST based to a Mac based studio, and he chose Logic, and I wanted to collaborate with him and make it easier and so on. So I switched to Logic myself as well, and never really looked back. But now I've looked into Cubase again just so I can be more compatible if I collab with somebody who uses Cubase. And the same with Ableton. I've actually had Ableton since version 1 or like a beta back then, but I've not until I produced my album Moments in 2015, and I worked with several producers who use Ableton. It wasn't until then when I finally actually made final pieces of music or productions with Ableton as well. JS16 is very much alive and kicking. He's producing mostly for other people and writing, but he's also made some of his own tracks. Like I played this track called Gateway 1999 recently. It works really well in a club setting, and it's funny to play that in the middle of a trance set because it's so different, and it's like hitting somebody in the head with a hammer. Have I ever used Acid Pro? I've tried it back in the day, not since then. Oscar Miller, I have a MacBook Pro 2018. Cone 248, if you don't have an idea coming out of you right then and there, I haven't felt a panic or been pissed off or anything like that in very, very, very many years about that. Yes, sometimes we don't get ideas flying out of us, or sometimes we have ideas but we don't necessarily have a way to put them out like we want to. But for that reason, I have a ton of samples that I haven't still gone through. I have a ton of presets in various synths that I still haven't checked out. And I have a ton of backlogged email and other admin shit that I should be doing at some point. So the mindset is that if you sit down at your studio and nothing comes out, you don't feel you're creative, whether it's just, I don't know, you see something, the arrangement is too empty, or, you know, you're stressing about, I don't know, illness or loved one or, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, this and that, whatever it is. Yeah, sometimes you are not creative. But at least for me as a producer, there's so much sort of this mechanical stuff, mechanical work, labor, admin stuff that I can always sit down here, and if I don't feel like working creatively, I can do all of that stuff, and then when I leave, I can feel that I accomplished something. So then the day wasn't a waste, and then I don't feel bad about a wasted day. And but production-wise, I have two things that I do if I like really need to or want to work creatively that day, but I'm not feeling it when I come in. I just go on the couch there or the recliner there. I put something in Spotify or some other thing that I want to play something out of, and I just sit there and listen to it for a while, and often, most of the time, I start feeling creative because I'm inspired by other people's music, emotions, production stuff, whatever I hear in a track. And an equally good thing is that I just sit down and I'm thinking like, you know what, I'm not going to make anything today creatively. I'll just pick the latest sample pack from Mayan or presets for Silent that he made, and this amazing pack, and I haven't checked them all through yet. And I put Logic on, Silent in it, and I start flicking through presets, play a couple of notes. Oh, that sounded good. Add a delay to it, or add a reverb to it, or add something to it, a little sidechain pumping, and start playing around. And what do you know, in 5 minutes or half an hour or whatever, I find myself noodling melodies or finding chord progressions, bass lines, and making notes, like saving, you know, Mayan sample pack or a preset pack, sound number 25 and whatever it's called, and a little bit of MIDI saved on the side as well for later use. And all of a sudden I've realized that I've actually created 5 melodies or 25 different this and that. And I can either jump on one of them right now, or I can think that, hey, I was creative, fun, this was good. Now bang on a couple of emails, and then when I come back next time, I have ammo for the next session. Again, for me, that's how my brain works. If I can make myself think that I did something valuable, productive in some sort of way, that sort of counts as, you know, if I knock off 20 emails, well, then I don't have to worry about them the next time I come in the studio, and then I'm free to be creatively better. Blinkbot, strong song structure. I have two ways. I often do work on a song sort of my old school way, which was like 4 to 8 bar loop, and then I build layers and layers and layers, whether it's drums or bass or synth and whatever parts that fit together. And then at one point I'll just start, basically I copy and paste it, you know, for 2 minutes, depends on what I want to do, or 7 minutes, and then I just create a basic structure. I start playing it from the beginning, and this is maybe like a extended mix and a club version of the track for DJs. You know, start with very little drums, so like a kick drum or even filtered kick drum, and then a clap and a hi-hat, or maybe filtered loop. And then after 8 bars, something else comes in, something else comes in, something else comes in, and until the track has built. And the long edits or intros are not that common anymore. So back in the day, it could be like 3 minutes of drums and then later bass and then some monotonous melodic elements coming in, or like a held chord, and then it drops at around like 2.5 or 3 minute mark in the breakdown. Now it's more like 1 minute, or some people do it like 45 seconds or whatnot. But either way, I just feel it. Like here, something still grows, something still grows. Okay, now it's grown enough in the intro that now it's time to go to breakdown. And I just feel my way through it. Like it's usually like 8 bar loops that are the 8 bar divisions. And then here it goes to the drop, and then the drop goes, and then you listen to the track like however long certain part with certain variation or added layer carries, and then you go to the next one and the next one. And these days, like for instance, this track has 2 breakdowns, but most tracks today that I get from, you know, the Armadas or Vandits or Anjunas and Suandas and whatnot, they don't have 2 breakdowns because the tracks are too long like that these days. But you just feel it. But the other way, if you're unsure, if you want some inspiration, take your favorite track of the moment that has a great arrangement that as a DJ or as a listener you feel that works really well, and split it to parts. Like a good example would be here. This is obviously my own track and I know how the arrangement goes, but it looks exactly like this. Go to drop a track that you like and know that works on the top of your arrangement. You basically wouldn't have my other stuff here, or you would just have like the first minute or 2. You look at the waveform and you split it up, you know, however it's split, almost every 8 bars or so, and then you see, okay, so there at 50 it goes now to a break. That track goes to your example track, and then you just sort of copy where in their arrangement shit happens and you reflect that to yours. You know, this track for instance has this kind of build up, and then boom, then it has a 2-bar, this like reset kind of thing. So build up into a little drop and then it takes off. Not every track has that. You know, your example track could have that, but yours could be better, say like this. But for instance, in this case, I felt that the build-up, it was hard to make the drop or the chorus sound bigger than the build-up, which is obviously a mixing matter as well and matter of the sounds and techniques I use there. But with this little 2-bar notch, with this 2-bar notch and then the little arp leading to it, I think it works, but it might not work very well. So take examples and then apply what you need or what you find good for your own stuff. Ark and Vivo, do you think moving to US was the best way to promote my music and meeting famous electronic producers? No, it wasn't. I didn't move to US for that. I moved to US because my wife's dad, so my father-in-law, unfortunately was sick and we needed to be there to support him. And living in the US, I didn't meet any more famous electronic producers than I met living elsewhere. I just met and still meet people on the road a lot of times and at festivals and so on. And these days, of course, online. It had very little to do and very little effect on my music career success, other than it was easier to tour in US, absolutely, living there. Have you ever wanted to get into film scoring games? Yeah, absolutely. And so my music has been used in films and ads and some TV and games as well. But I haven't purpose-built music for movie, for instance. And I definitely would like to do that. And the same applies for gaming as well. All right. Let's see. Shaker. Ride. Hi-hats. Oh, so I guess check this too. So my mixer here. What do we have here? Clap, hi-hat, loop, ride, shaker, all have a little bit of delay on them, or actually reverb. This is a reverb channel. Which just adds a little bit of space. It's actually barely audible. It's more audible on this. This has a little more of that. This is the same pluck that is in the original, yes, on the album before the Storm album. I sampled, or took the samples to JS16 Studio back then, and but like you can hear, if you compare this one and then the album version has a little more to it in a sense. There's the chord progression is a little more complex. And it changed its form a little bit more, and I like it how that is. But I also am very happy and proud about this version, which was the initial version. But a lot of the stuff that we did with Jaakko JS was my demos were a little, I don't know, raw, and maybe some of them underdeveloped, and then he got ideas out of those, and then we worked on them together, and I'm very thankful for that, because that also gave me an opportunity to become a more professional artist that I was quicker, and basically allowed me to have more professional sound, and then that kind of gave me a foundation to make more music and get gigs and get the career going. So, do I send all my leads and plucks to one reverb? No, but it's not no all the time. I'm actually sort of trying to go back to a little bit of my older way of mixing, which does actually have something like you're suggesting. So, with the DAW and with the computing power of today, you can easily throw like delays and reverbs and whatnot on every track. And sometimes it's amazing, and or it's sort of always amazing, but sometimes it's useful to be able to do that freely. But in many cases, it could be better for the mix control and the final mix sound if you use the same send reverb, for instance, and send delay for several things, so as to group them as a bigger part of the track, and to get them to sound like they're in the same space. And I'm not talking like in rock or something, maybe it's more or any kind of band music and live music with actual vocals and actual instruments, it might sound weird having the different reverb on this and that instrument. On electronic, it doesn't rules-wise matter that much, but it still might be more cohesive if you have similar things at least in the same kind of space. And in electronic, you can obviously do also several Synth effects, and one would have more low-end cut, and one would have more, you know, high-end boost or whatever. But the basic reverb preset is still the same, so you could get away with having more reverb, for instance, on some sounds because it's more low cut or something like that. But your ears will still think that it's the same reverb in the mix. Stereo ambience tips. I don't know if I'm the best at that. What I often do is I have or try different things. But what I do is for big pads and leads that I want a lot of reverb on, but I don't want it to clutter anything, is to use a send reverb, and then use a compressor after that, a sidechain compressor that is triggered with the dry sound. So when the dry sound is on, you can either have it ducking, you know, X amount of dBs so that the reverb itself doesn't wash the whole dry sound. And then when the dry sound ends, the reverb kind of comes up. And you can do that with a single band reverb or delay, or you could be even less noticeable in a way that if you check the frequencies where you have the dry sound most, where it's toned, what you want to hear is, and then select the frequency range around that key frequency that you duck down on the reverb. So then there's still a lot of, or some reverb around the whole sound, so it doesn't like duck in and out all the time, but certain range ducks in and out. So then when the lead is on, the dry sound is on, you hear that cutting through well, but there's a little bit of lower and higher frequencies that still have, there's a reverb in there. But then when the sound ends, then the full range comes back in, and that can be quite even drastic in that way, how much it comes back in. But because there's other, you know, other ranges around it are there anyways, so you don't hear the pumping back and forth that well. And then also having, I mean, there's all kinds of tricks, and some of them work and some of them you think that work, and then you're just happy when you tried something, whether it actually sounds better or not, I don't know. But you could use two reverbs that are about the same preset or even different reverb units, but similar plate sounds, for instance, and pan one right and pan one left, or pan one, you know, 30 degrees or whatever on the right and left, and then send that to them. And so the difference in the algorithms and the actual sounds make it sound quite stereo. If you want to make it more, or if you want to do it the same with two of the same reverbs, but pan one left, pan one hard right, and then add a like a pitch shifter and add, you know, one +5 or +10 and the other one -5 or 10, and whatever, that make a little difference between the channels, that might make your sound wider or the ambience sound wider. I don't know. So many things that you can do. Just imagination basically is your limit. Well, Fluxor, yes, if we're talking about pad sounds, that sidechain trigger, it is true, it would be longer notes triggering it, but mostly I'm talking about the lead sounds that have some sort of attacks or clear starting and ending. But with pad sounds, that sidechaining won't do the same thing, but then you would without the side chaining, you would treat the reverb channel so that it gets wider, whatever you do with it, and then you EQ it so that it doesn't accumulate with the pads, because it easily, you know, if you have a long reverb and the pads change chords, and then the reverb is still ringing at the same chord that earlier, so then there's two chords on top of each other. If you have a lot of low end in that, for instance, then you hear the clashing better. All right, now I think, because we're sort of gone through this, that I could any unreleased track that didn't make it to the final albums, and I have plans to release them in the future. I don't know if any like as is, but I definitely have tracks that have been sort of grandfathered into later productions. Like I'm to a fault, I do hang on to things that I once thought that had something great in them, and so I don't want to let go of them totally. There's definitely, it's like on Moments album, there's a couple of tracks that have parts of projects that started like over 10 years before the album came out. Not that I was making those tracks for Moments album for 10 years, but there were several things that were parts of, you know, half tracks or whatnot. So I do want to, and I get great satisfaction when I get something like that into a finished product. For instance, well, actually, there's one thing that I already made around the time of my Label This album that came out in 2007, and that's the piece revisited track on Moments album. And for one reason or another, around the 2008 time, I couldn't get the, it wasn't the band, but it was something else. I couldn't get the piece, my track piece revisited, that is based on Apocalypticus track called, or song called Peace. I couldn't get that released. I couldn't get that on the album, and I sort of forgotten about it. But then when I started compiling tracks for the Moments album, I asked them, the guys again, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. And you know, they gave me all the stems. I think I had earlier like sampled stuff more, and then I got all the stems, all the amazing cello, like low bass ones and high ones and all kinds of stuff, Mikko's drums and whatnot to mess with. And then I made the, so then I sort of revisited the track production after like 7-8 years, and then I made the version ready for Moments album. So that was definitely one of those. Okay. I'm going to do a full breakdown of the other two tracks, Coming Home and Tell Me, that I had now as the options in later streams. But before I end today, I'm going to quickly show you those as well. So this one was Calm Before the Storm, and now that I already closed it, I can't say, but I'm just guessing that it had 30 to 35 separate tracks total, maybe. And so let's take a look at Tell Me, which is a nightmare compared to that. Tell Me was the first single of my album Label This in 2007, 2008. It came out in different times, different countries, but it was my first album that I produced all on my own. So I have 60 tracks in this. Oops, what is that? Can't play it in time because there's a delay here now. Yes. Okay, so all right, guys. So I just wanted to quickly play this one. I'm going to wrap it up. This has been Darude in the studio, and this is what I'm going to be doing on every Monday. I'll be breaking down tracks I've made previously, tracks, remixes, and I'm also going to be going through some of my hardware stuff that I have here and how I've used them, and then whatever I can come up with here in the studio that has to do with something I make. I mean, I'm going to do gear reviews at some point as well, like the lav mics that I have, and the Rode little Rode microphone transmitters and receivers that I'm using for the stream and whatnot. I don't know if you guys saw that. I think you did. And this track is called Tell Me, and it was one of the 3 that was options, but you chose Calm Before the Storm. I'm gonna do Tell Me some other time, but I wanted to show this thing because somebody asked about if there's been tracks that I've made but didn't make it on the albums, and if I released them later. This is not one of those, but there's an interesting thing in this that you might recognize. Can you tell me which track did I borrow / was inspired by for these drums in this breakbeat in Tell Me? Because that's what I do often, sort of on purpose. I have some stuff carry over from old tracks and old projects, even if the track sounds quite different and it is doing different things. From Deep Music, no, that's not Prodigy. That's actually from one of my own tracks that I reused those drum sounds from, and it is called Music. It's actually not exactly the same, but there's a good bit of similar stuff in the drums. Okay, so this track is quite a lot more complicated than Calm Before the Storm that you saw earlier, and we can check into this at a later date. I'm gonna do probably on, how about we just do it right now. I could set a poll on what you want to hear next, and let me figure out quickly. I'm gonna make notes for myself as well, so I'll remember. How about my track Out of Control, which I actually don't have a full breakdown, but I can figure it out enough for you. And then we can do Label This from Label This album. And then we can do, which one would be a third one? Out of Control, Label This, and which other track is going to be an option for next week? Anybody? I want to think. I knew it. In the Darkness. Hold on. In the Darkness is on the same album as Label This. How about we do one from... Okay, so cool. Yeah, let's do Next to You then. Okay, so those 3 are going to be in my poll for next week. Out of Control, Label This, and Next to You. And let's see how quick I am with my interwebs stuff right now. Let's go. I'm going to drop a link to it in the stream in just a sec. Let's do here, and I'll do a similar wording, and then I'm gonna tweet breakdown. Ouch. In the studio, okay. Poll. Choice 1 is going to be, come on, there. Out of control. Choice 2 will be next to you, and choice 3 will be label this. Poll length, we can make it 7 days because we're here. Out of control, next to you, label this. All right. Boom. Okay. My tweet was sent, view, and copy link to tweet. And now I'm gonna drop it for you guys. Do you now see a link? So thank you so much for joining me. This is Darude in the studio, and this was a track breakdown of my track Calm Before the Storm, the original mix that I made in sometime 1999. Next week, either Out of Control, label this, or Next to You. You choose. And then if you want to catch more of me, my ugly mug on this camera and some fun stuff, dial it in on Wednesday at Dial It In, and I'll be taking your WhatsApp messages, reading them, answering some questions from them, and then I'll be calling some of you. So if you do message me, either on Wednesday or before that, say where you're messaging from, your country maybe, and then what do you want me to call you, your name or nickname or whatever. And then I'm going to be calling a peer of some sort and having a chat, and you guys can listen into on that. So I'll see you on Wednesday, and the live show or live DJing will happen on Friday. And both this Monday is at 4 p.m. my time, and Wednesday and Friday are 6 p.m. my time, so 2 hours later. So wherever you are right now, on Wednesday and Friday, it will be 13 minutes from now. Okay? Thanks guys for joining, and I will see you next time.